Hey everyone, this is Chris, and you're listening to One Cross Radio. And today we are joined by nobody. It's just me. And I feel like I just said One Cross Radio quite weirdly. Sorry about that. I'm feeling a little under the weather today, but I mean, when aren't I? And yeah, today's episode is actually an entirely unplanned one. It's just something that kind of an idea that hit me last night while I was texting with a dear friend of the podcast and just dear amazing friend in general, Jen Percy from Cardboard Koinonia. She messaged me because she and Matt are making their way through Doctor Who. She's like, I just got to Doomsday, and it hurts, and it still hurts. Which any Whovian who knows Doomsday know that hurt don't go away, man. And that actually got me thinking about today's episode. It's probably going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but it's. You know what? It's one I'm excited to do. It's unprompted, and it's a bit about two different things. One is about, partially it's about Doctor Who, and then the other part is wrapping my time at Pape Youth Center and at Calvary right before I got married. And weirdly, these two things to me are fairly intertwined. Just because around the time I was getting really involved in Calvary, Jill and I had just started dating, and then she really got me into Doctor Who. And Doctor Who does, even though I haven't watched it as much as I used to, and the newest seasons / series, as they're called now, haven't really been grabbing me. I think Jodie's got a great Doctor in her. It's just out of what I've seen, they didn't get the chance to get it yet, and it seems like that chance has passed, as she is leaving, and the showrunner is leaving, and the internet is ridiculously happy about that, and I'm not sure about that. Anyways, I can't really comment because I haven't seen too much of it, but what I remember getting really into Doctor Who, and Doctor Who, in so many ways changed me, in the sense of, one, it was something that Jill and I bonded over super fast, so it in some ways it helped deepen our relationship, having those things that you can both, that you and your significant other can geek out about, whether it's actually geeky stuff or not, like having common interests, it's only a good thing. And she really got me into it. And Doctor Who also, it changed in many ways how I watch things. It was a show that before, I've always watched and enjoyed stuff, but in many ways, no other show had sucked me in and got me caring about fictional characters and the stories as much as Doctor Who did. And after that, I've been watching, I'd watch things at a deeper level where it would impact me. I remember starting off with series 1 of the revival of the show with Christopher Eccleston, and he's only around for one season, and the first series, it's got some great episodes, and then it's got some misfires along the way. But then when you get to the end, when he regenerates, it hit. I was like, oh man, I'm actually kind of bummed. It did hit me, and it had an effect on my day. That only gets magnified immensely when you get to David Tennant and his era on the show, because that's where you could argue the bad trope that I'm glad they did move on from when Capaldi joined, where it became there would be a lot of hints at, well, in Ten and Rose's case, they were flat out in love with each other, and then when they were ripped apart into different realities, oh my gosh, that was heart-wrenching. And and the aforementioned Doomsday. I remember watching that on my lunch break while I was at Calvary, and my day was wrecked. Like I was done. Like it hit me on an emotional level. To the point that like a couple days later, the theme was hitting in my mind, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm still done. I'm not, like I'm still. That's a wrap on me today. Like, in some ways it's silly, but in other ways I love it when art can connect with people like that, and shows and movies and stories can connect like that. And Doctor Who was the thing that got me to that level. Now, of course, people can take that too obsessively, and that's something I guard myself against, but it was fun experiencing it, except for that raw hurt of Doomsday. And even years later, I'm still like, man, that's such a bummer. And there'd be so many other things throughout Doctor Who that would just be gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. Especially like Tennant's exit, which weirdly enough I had seen before I had the context of the show. I was over with my wonderful family in England, and then we were there for Christmas into New Year's, and we were watching the final episode of the specials. So I'll quickly explain that. With Doctor Who, there's often a series, and the series is about 12 to 13 episodes. And then there's a one-off Christmas special, and then sometimes a New Year special. Sometimes, but most of the time it's a Christmas special. Well, with Tennant, he debuted at the in the finale, because the regeneration happens at the finale, and then you flesh out the character properly in the preceding season. But Eccleston left in the finale of Series 1, so then Tennant's debut episode, really, as the Doctor, was the Christmas special of that year. And then he had his 13, and he was around for 4 series. But then after series... he was around for 3 series, because he was there for Series 2, 3, and 4. But then afterwards, he was leaving the show, and then they did 4 specials throughout that year instead of a proper series. And then along with him leaving was the showrunner, and it was like the Russell Davies era of the show was kind of coming to an end. And then you got into the Moffat era with Eleven and Matt Smith, who, even though Smith isn't my favorite Doctor, I loved the 11th Doctor. It's just 12 won me over. 12 might be my second favorite Doctor. But anyways, like, you got that finale, and the finale of 10 and the End of Time Part 1 and 2, like, especially after the main story is resolved, it's like this tour. He goes on tour, saying goodbye to other characters, former companions, and everyone from that era. And then his exit is just really, really heartbreaking, because the Doctor doesn't want to go, to the point that that's the final line in the show. And I will tie all of this back to the Pape Youth Center stuff. I forgot how much I like talking Doctor Who. And then you get into Series 5 with Matt Smith, and Smith goes through up to the end of Series 7, and like Tennant, he ends on some specials, including there's the 50th anniversary, and then there is his final episode, which is the Christmas special, and that you enter the Capaldi era. And Matt Smith's Regeneration, while it doesn't gut punch me the same way Tennant's does, it's also heartbreaking, because you grow attached to the character. In 11, I really, really enjoyed the 11th Doctor, but also that's where we had the my boyfriend the Doctor thing, because there seemed to be interest in Clara, and having interest in him, and Amy Pond at one point had googly eyes for him and everything, and that Doctor actually got married to River Song, and there was a lot of great emotional stuff. But also, unfortunately, some of my lesser favorite moments with 11 are because friggin' Moffat likes to get too attempted high concept, and you could almost say too up its own butt. Where at points it I don't know, it just got less enjoyable for me. And then we got such a very different Doctor in Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, who was just this awesome curmudgeon who started off so darkly, as such a departure. It took a series to figure out how that Doctor was and who he was, and so Series 9 and then especially Series 10, that is the best version of 12, where he can be cold, he can be harsh and grumpy, but also there's a lot of love and a lot of affection in that character for his companions and other people. And even though his time was after my time at Pape Youth, it was still part of it is just like, man, there's a lot of stuff he said that resonated. All right, so where this ties into Pape Youth is, like I said, I was getting into this as I was getting hired at Calvary and as I was doing more stuff out of the church and doing more community-based stuff. And as much as I've said, like, Hector from Faith and Fandom, and then Bex from Redeemed Otaku, they really put it on, they really put on my radar how to articulate, like, godly lessons that you can see in media, that in spots that frankly it might not have been intended, but you can see it there organically, and you can learn from it without like shoving it in there or doing anything. I was about to call it crass, but not in the vulgar sense, just in the this is bogus crass kind of sense. Instead, like, you can see it there organically and naturally, and it's not like slapping Jesus on the Lifesavers logo and saying like, oh, look at this, because it's kitsch. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But during that time, especially as I started doing Pape Youth Center, part of that role, aside from doing community stuff and working with youth, was sharing the gospel with people, and then also figuring out who you are and how you share. And in weird ways, I got a bit of that from Doctor Who, and weirdly enough, The Walking Dead. Just because it, like, as you grow as a person, in any walk, like, you're constantly going to change. But I was getting so into, like, I was getting super into these shows, and they helped me organically find a way to address the gospel and share things where I'd be like, you know what, I can lean in to my fandom. I can express like, hey, look, there's this thing, and where I might not be able to extrapolate the lessons like Hector and Bex so wonderfully have like now taught me. But at the time, I'd be able to, like, you know what, I can reference these things because without jumping, like, without it being a bandwagon thing, without it being that, where it's like, because the youth know I'm into these things. And that was an awesome gateway where instead of being like, okay, how do I best present this? And how do I put on like the most representation? But of course, I'm of course during all that, don't get me wrong, I'm praying that God will use me and represent the truth of the gospel in the most authentic and real way. At the same point, I'm also being like, how can I authentically share this with the youth? Because don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself, friends. People, and weirdly enough, especially younger kids, and we don't, or not necessarily kids, but young adults and teens, as much flack as we give them, they can pick up when someone is pretending, or putting on the show. Or where it's like, of course, our natural inclination is in certain situations to show one side more than another, but youth can really are really good at reading people. Maybe it's because with high school being the terrible thing that it is, which anybody who's I don't understand when people are like, oh, high school is the best time of your life. No, it's not. You're going through hormonal changes, emotional changes with everybody else doing that at the same time. Kids and teens are absolutely vicious to each other. Like, so it's all this angst and emotion and hormones with everybody else going through it at the same time for like 8 hours a day. It's not conducive to a fun environment. Like, there can be some fun times, but by and large, it's not a good experience. And I think that youth get used to, like, they're able to see, like, out of some of that, they're able to get a good idea at reading people in some way as a defense, where it's like, is this person trying to upsell me? Or, like, am I going to get the rug pulled out from under me? So many youth have that experience, where like I was saying, the youth can tell when you're putting on a show. So it would be like what inspired me from Doctor Who, and the attachment I have to it in this was like, you know what? I'm not going to put on a show. I'm not going to do this. I can just frankly address my nerdiness through this. And if it's a surface lesson, like I'm not teaching a lesson on Doctor Who with the youth, but I can reference it. Some of the youth watch it, we bond over it, where it's like, hey, it's vaguely similar to this, but this is my end, this is the thing that got the idea going. And it did give me a fair bit of inspiration, and it helped me get to that level where you could be like, look, here's what the gospel really says, and this is how I can reflect who I really am. And part of it was just embracing my fandom of Doctor Who. And then in many ways, I wish I could take the lessons I've learned from that God has taught me through Hector and through Bex, and take it back then. But also, it would have been different. And I'm thankful for all the experiences and my time at Pape Youth. Another time that it was interesting. Was in some way, like, I'm not sure when Tennant knew he was leaving, and he announced it before they did the specials, but still, he knew he was leaving before it got there, and that is a very tough thing to do. Now, unlike, say, Doctor Who, or where a show, it's announced before you get there that the person's leaving and then everybody knows, I knew about 9 months before it was announced that I was stepping down that would be happening. Now, there were a couple variables up in the air during that time. Jill and I were trying to figure out where we were going to live. I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing for work. I wasn't sure where I was going to land. We were leaning towards moving away from Toronto because neither of us are fans of the city. And like that year, like I said, from around probably early to mid-December, I knew that it was happening. Even if we hadn't officially dropped dime. And this is something that not many people do, I think. Anybody who's been a pastor's kid knows about this. Anybody knows what this is like. Anybody who's worked in ministry, I think, knows what this is like. It's unlike other jobs where you basically give your 2 weeks and then you're gone. Or often people are just like, I'm done, and then they're out. With this, it was knowing for months, and there'd be times where it would just be like, really, really rough, because you'd have that was going down with food bank as well, where we'd have people talking about to us about like, oh, we could do this next year, we'd have these plans, and then myself and my boss being like, yeah, that's like, we wouldn't be lying, because we're not about lying, but it would just be like, how do you balance this, because it does impact those things, and especially with youth need consistency. A lot of us do, but I'd say youth in particular, having that consistent, reliable face is important, and when that changes, or it can have that impact. So it was challenging, from about January to May. It would just be this buildup of stuff where I'm like, oh man, like, I know this is happening and I can't drop dime. And it was rough. It was rough at points. And then because I was involved in so many different ministries, like with one of them, it would be fine to let them know, but the difficulty is some of the kids were also kids from people involved with other ministries. Like with Youth Center, we had community youth and church youth there, and the whole point of it was like, hey, we want to create a safe drop-in space for the community, like the youth in our community. And then it was also like, hey, we'd love to get some of our youth involved with youth from the community, because there seems to be this isolation and separation, and we don't want that. Myself and the youth pastor were like, that's not what Jesus would do, so let's work on getting some crossover here, you know? And that impacted, because we couldn't, like, then there were certain spots where we couldn't tell when we wanted to, because then it would put the kids in an uncomfortable position of knowing and then not being able to tell, or dropping dime before you could. And you don't want, when it's an announcement from you about a program that affects somebody else, you want it to come from you. You don't want that to be secondhand knowledge. You don't want that to be secondhand information, because that burns, that slights, and it can add to the hurt. And especially in terms of like the youth at the time, it would have been like, hey, the message could have easily been like, I don't think you're important enough for me to directly tell you. And that, of course, wasn't the case. As much as I was like, man, I'm bummed that I'm leaving food bank. And I was like, it was that bittersweet part where you're excited about moving, you're excited about this new chapter, and to liken it to Doctor Who, like for me, it was almost like this huge regeneration, because I was leaving what had been established, and I was starting something brand new, a new life with Jill in a new city, and I was going to have a new job, and so many things were changing that the regeneration stuff was a lot on my mind during that time. I remember I just kept going back to it, and I'd actually be talking to Jen about that, where I'm like, man, I'm feeling like the final lines from both Tennant and Smith's tenures were coming up, were on my mind a lot. Where
Hey everyone, this is Chris, just adding this quick little insert. The audio unfortunately cut out for like 30 seconds right around this spot, so I'm just adding this in post. Basically all I was saying here was the final words of the 10th and 11th Doctors were really hitting me that week. And with 10 in particular, his final words were a very bittersweet, I don't want to go. And that was resonating with me, because as much as I did want to go, and I was so excited to begin my life with my amazing wife Jill, and I was so excited for that to start, much like Tennant leaving Doctor Who, he was going to miss the role. I was going to miss what I was doing and the relationships that I had started with the youth. So it's just that bittersweetness was really resonating. As much as I was excited to start, I was still like, I'm going to miss this. So it was just really, really hitting. All right, back to the rest of the episode.
But then also, Smith's, where it's like, I will always remember when the doctor was me. And in that time, he is referring to his specific time there. And I was like, you know what, I will always have these fond, awesome memories about the journey God had me on over those years, through starting volunteering at Pape Youth Center and then working on at the church and then becoming the, the guy running Pape Youth. Like, that was all just such a wonderful journey, and I hold that time near and dear, and I'm thankful for all the lessons God taught me during that time. So that's where I'm also like, I will always remember. But it was starting to just to wind down. I remember where it was all we realized it was all coming together over a course of a week and a half, and this week and a half ended up being very, very brutal. Cathartic, but brutal, in the sense of, with one of the ministries, I knew I wanted to move away into something else anyway, so that made it a lot easier. Where I was like, okay, with the community dinner, I was involved for about 2 years, maybe 3. First year I was there like every single week, down in the thing. And then second year I was like, you know what, I don't need to be here as much. Like, I can spearhead it, but I can pull back a bit. It's being its own thing, and we got this person running it, and they're there all the time, and I can oversee. And then with that so it was only 2 years, and then with that third year, because my hours were increasing with Youth Unlimited and with Pape Youth, we were looking at, like, you know what, I'll pull back from community dinner, and then I can increase my time with Youth Unlimited and with the youth, because the youth were also starting to get really involved in food bank as well. It was a great way for us to give some of the community youth a spot to do their volunteer hours that they need to do in order to graduate. So as I was doing that year, even though I had moved out from community dinner, I was still peripherally, to a degree, involved, because I still help with the report writing and the stats, and I'd pop up every once in a while. I got to share my testimony and share some of the messages where it's sharing the love of Christ and pointing people there towards the gospel. I got to do that and dress up as Santa for Christmas, which was always a blast. I love doing that. Something I actually got to do out in Hamilton at Living Rock a couple times. It was just such a delight. But then, we were getting up to where it was coming to a head, where it was like... my boss was also leaving at the same time. Now, he was leaving before I was, so it was a thing where it was like, okay, we're gonna drop dime here. So he had mentioned it, and then it was like me quickly going in as well, being like, I'm gonna ask y'all not to say a word. Like, it can't leave this room yet. And the reason being was we knew it was going to be that Friday that I was dropping dime about moving on and leaving Youth Center. And that Friday, I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. Jen saw me cry so much. Like, during the day in the build-up, and then as I was announcing it with the youth, and the youth were sad, and I was sad, but we were also happy, because it was really copacetic, because a lot of youth were graduating at the same time, and we were setting up the summer program, and Jen was doing a summer program with the girls as well. So it was nice because there was some of the summer stuff, and I got to wind it down over that. But still, even though it's like this happy stuff, it's also sad. There's emotions with it. And then the following week, it was dropping dime with the food bank staff. Because at that point, and then rounding it out with telling the church. So it's still in the church, and then later having your final one, where I think my final day with Food Bank was early October. And my final day with with Pape Youth Center, even though there were a couple different things where Calvary was changing, and then the youth pastor was changing as well. So Pape Youth Center and the funding had actually run out as well. So it was just like, all right, it seems like this season has passed right now. So a lot of things were just working where it's like it's time to move on. All these things were coalescing together. Where it was like you had the big emotion thing, but in a way I was glad it continued on after that. Where like, okay, now we got to do the wonderful stuff with the youth. We got to have those moments. I got to set them up for as much success as possible. Share with them the truth and love of Christ and the gospel as much to the best of my ability. And then also like work with them for like gearing them up for as they're going to school, where it's like, hey, here are some excellent resources, both Christian and social resources that are going to be in your areas for when you're some are moving into high school, some are moving on to college, and those kind of things. And it was just such a emotional but great time. And weirdly enough, it's like I've got all this ties together from Doctor Who. None of it was kickstarted, but it was just at the same time. This fandom for this wonderful geeky property like was happening at the same time, and then a lot of emotions and themes somehow, at least in my head, were tying in with the show. So then this whole trip down memory lane started last night with Jen texting about Doomsday still kicking her in the guts because it's this emotional gut punch. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. It's a bit different than what we've done for a while, and it was a fun trip down memory lane. And yeah, if you're listening to this, I do hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to attach a link to a song from Doctor Who, if not several, but the one in particular. It's a version of the theme from Doomsday, but it's just this stripped back oboe version that was from Capaldi's final episode. And so far it's unreleased, and it's just gorgeous, just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to share that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please keep me and everyone in your prayers. Things are rough for everyone. And please keep everything and everyone in your prayers. I love you guys. I think that's where I'm going to end it. Of course, you can always check us out on Patreon if you feel you can financially support. We've got a number of tiers. Our newest one is supporting us so we can support others. Because there's a number of places I'd love to support that just right now I financially can't. Check us out on Patreon if you enjoy what we do. If you've gained anything from it, which is actually a prayer. My constant prayer for One Cross Radio is one that'll bring a smile to your face, because I want this to be entertaining. Even when I get ranty, I want it to be entertaining. But then I also do constantly pray that the Lord will speak to y'all through this, and I hope He has today. And yeah, if you feel like there's anything you can do financially, hit up our Patreon. The tiers start real low. Yeah. And then also, if you do want to read some of the stuff that I've done, where it's finding lessons from wonderful, or not even just me, but from others and from people much more talented than I, where it's finding wonderful lessons about God and biblical lessons from unexpected resources and wonderfully geeky resources. I cannot recommend enough Faith and Fandom and the series, the 42. And I've contributed to both series, one with Faith and Fandom Volume 7 and the other with the Fantastic 42. You can find all of these on Amazon, and Hector from Faith and Fandom has all his chapters up for free. If you Google Faith and Fandom, the website, you'll find them there. I can't recommend them enough. They're such a blessing. Anyways, all that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless, my friends. Peace!